All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So today we are looking at supply and demand. And what you're going to do is you're going to take notes off of this presentation. Um, I would wait for the recording, wait for me to post a recording to take notes. That way, uh, if you're watching now, then you can just follow along and not have to worry about taking the notes. That way we could just kind of move through this. Um, so supply and demand, I'm going to be working off of our Canvas page because I want to show you how to use Nearpod if you've never used Nearpod before to do the little practice activity after the presentation. So I'm clicking on the assignment here. And I'm going to use our PowerPoint that's embedded here, something I figured out how to finally do. All right, so supply and demand, demand and supply, however you want to say it. Very important concept in economics. It helps to understand why prices fluctuate, why prices go up and down, what types of consumer and producer actions impact price. So it's very important to understand supply and demand so you can kind of understand the basics of how the economy works. And especially during this time of Corona, we've seen things like gas prices drop. So you got to think, why did gas prices drop so drastically? What went into that? Well, it's all about supply and demand. Why? Is it hard to find toilet paper or hand soap in the grocery store now? It goes back to supply and demand. So hopefully after this presentation, you'll understand a little bit more about why things are the way they are. All right, so what is demand? Demand is pretty much the easier of the two terms to understand because we are all consumers. Demand is all about being a consumer, and it's specifically your ability or willingness as a consumer to buy something, to buy a good or a service at various prices. So when you go out shopping, if you go out and get a haircut, if you go to the grocery store and pick up, toilet paper or hand soap, you are exercising that demand. You have an ability and a willingness to go out and buy a product. Notice it's ability and willingness because there's some things that you might want. You have a willingness, but you don't have the ability to go out and buy them. And that goes back to scarcity. Or you have the ability, you have plenty of money, but there are some things you don't want to buy. You don't have a willingness to buy them. So when we talk about demand, you have to have the ability and the willingness to buy that good or service. So that's demand. It's all about the consumer. All right, so there's going to be a little bit of math involved. So there's something called the demand schedule. So what happens is for any good or service, economists look at the various prices that good or service can be sold at, and then it shows the corresponding quantity demanded at that price. So it could be any good or service. Let's just take, for example, music. So if someone puts out a new album on Amazon or Apple Music, a new album, so that album could be priced at $10, $20, $30, $40, $50. And then the number to the right, the demand, the quantity that's going to be demanded at that price. So looking at the numbers, you should see a pattern or a trend where at $10, there's 500 albums demanded at that price. 500 people basically are willing to purchase that album. At $20, it drops down to $400, $30, and so on, until you get down to $50, where the demand is only 100 units or albums, whatever the product is that we're talking about, the good or service. So keep that in mind. So give you a little chance to kind of look at that. understand the numbers. So you should start seeing a trend or a pattern. Now, another thing is related to math is graphing. So if you look at this in terms of X versus Y, you can graph these numbers. And when you graph them, you're going to get what's called a demand curve. When you graph these numbers, usually you're going to put your quantity demanded on the the x-axis. Then your price is usually going to be on that y-axis. And then when you plot those points, you're going to get this downward sloping curve. So if you're familiar with math, they talk about the slope of a curve or a line. Notice it's down. Down and to the right is how it's sloping. So we call that the demand curve. Even though it's not curved in this example, usually it's going to look something like a kind of a J curve. Excuse me, I guess it would be a backwards J curve. It's going to be sloping in that direction. So just based off of these numbers, we know that there's a relationship between the price of a product and the quantity demanded of that product. We call that the law of demand. So the law of demand basically states that as the price of a good or service rises and other factors remain unchanged, then the quantity demanded for that product will fall. And if the price of that product falls, the quantity as the price of that product falls, the quantity demanded for that product will rise. That's pretty much common sense. If there's something that you buy on a regular basis, if all of a sudden the price went up, you might be less likely, or you might buy less of that product. If the price were to fall, you might buy more of that product. So we call that the law of demand. And notice it's a law. That means typically this is going to be a constant thing. You can be confident that anytime the price moves in one direction or the other, the quantity demanded for that product is going to move in the opposite direction. Now notice we talk about these other factors. So what are these other factors that could impact the quantity demanded of a product? Those could be your income. If your income goes up or down, then that's going to impact your demand. What you can buy. If just like now, people losing their jobs, that's going to impact demand. If you're not working, you don't have that extra money to spend on things. So you no longer have the ability to go out and buy things. If you were to get a raise or you get a new job, then all of a sudden you have more money. That's going to impact your ability and willingness to go out and buy more things. Population. So when we talk about the population, you got to kind of look at it in terms of a community setting. So if a community grows, if a lot of people move into a neighborhood, then there's going to be naturally more demand in that neighborhood. So if I have a shop in a neighborhood and a lot of people are moving in, that's more customers. If all of a sudden people move out of the community, that's less demand, less customers. So that's what we mean by population. Expectations. So that has to do with how consumers think about what's going to happen to the price of this product. If I think the price is going to be lower next week, then I might wait. So my demand right now might be low compared to next week when I think the price is going to go down. If I think the price is going to jump up next week, then I want to go out and buy it now so I don't have to pay a higher price. That's kind of how things might be with gas. Right now, you can buy as much gas as you want because it's so cheap. But eventually that gas price is going to go back up in the future. So that's going to impact how consumers look at gas, our expectations. Substitutes and complements. So this has to do with other products. So if you look down there, I've got kind of a small little box that has the definition. It's got ways to look at complements and substitutes. So a substitute obviously is a good or service that can replace the original good or service that you were going to purchase. So take something simple like Coke and Pepsi. That's kind of a, when you go to a restaurant, you might ask for Coke and they say, well, we don't have Coke products, we have Pepsi. All right, fine, give me Pepsi. So a lot of people will substitute those easily. So if all of a sudden Pepsi was a lot more expensive than Coke, then I'm not going to worry about buying Pepsi anymore. I'll just switch to Coke, or vice versa. So substitutes, you got to think about, is there something else I could buy that will replace this more expensive item? If there is, then my demand for this item is gonna be less. Okay, things that don't have substitutes are usually going to be more expensive because they're more rare. There is no substitute. A lot of people are really big on the iPhone because they don't see there's a substitute. They're not willing to go buy another type of phone because the iPhone is, I guess, so unique. I'm not an iPhone user, but people who are iPhone users, they pretty much won't ever use another phone in their life because they're so used to the iPhone. So they're willing to spend more money on iPhones because there's no alternative for them to pick, at least in their mind. There's no alternative, so they're willing to pay that higher price. Complements are goods and services that go together. So if I buy this product, then I also am probably going to buy this product. So there's a picture there, the pancakes and the syrup. If it was super expensive to buy syrup, if syrup for some reason became really scarce and really expensive, then how would that impact other things that I buy? Well, I'm not going to buy things that need syrup. If I'm no longer going to buy syrup because the price of syrup is so high, well, then I'm also going to not buy as many waffles. I'm not going to buy any pancake mix, anything else that needs syrup. All right, so that's what we mean by complements, products that go together. So if your demand for product A changes, then it also might impact the complement, product B, that goes with it. Think about video game. If you're a video game player and they come out with, they're going to come out with the new PlayStation 5. Well, if the games that go with PlayStation 5 are like $200 a pop, I'm not going to go out and buy a PlayStation 5 because I know I'm not going to be able to afford the games that go with it. So that's what we mean by complements. So hopefully that's not too confusing to you. Nope, can't go back. All right, so that was demand. So we're going to change gears. So demand was about the consumer. So now we're going to look at supply. In supply, you've got to put yourself in the role of a producer. Okay, so over the past couple of weeks, you guys looked at things like factors of production, being an entrepreneur. Hopefully you did your food truck business, so you know a little bit about being a producer, someone who's going to produce something to start a business. Hold on, let me let the hurricane pass. Jeez. It's a pretty day, but the wind's strong. All right, so with supply, when we talk about supply, once again, it's about the producer. The ability and the willingness of a producer to make a certain quantity of goods and services available. And off the top of my head, I was just thinking about restaurants. So restaurants in some states are starting to open back up. And what they've got to decide is, yes, I can open back up, but am I willing to open back up as a producer? Because what if I don't get enough customers? There's no need in me opening my shop if nobody is going to come buy anything. I might be wasting my money by reopening. So there's a lot of factors that go into this idea of, as a producer, first of all, do I have the ability to produce something? And then beyond that, do I have a willingness to produce it? What's my motivation? If I'm not going to make money because one of the motivating factors for a producer is making money, profit. We call it the profit motive. You're motivated by making money. So if I know I can't make money, what is the motivation for me to open up my shop or to produce this product if I can't make a profit? There's no motivation. So keep that in mind as we talk about supply. All right, once again, we're dealing with numbers, so we're going to look at some numbers here. And this is key to remember. The market sets the price. So if I'm producing lemonade, I'm going to open up a lemonade food truck, and I'm going to sell lemonade out of my truck. Well, the market sets a price. I can't just show up and say, all right, $20 a glass for lemonade. Okay, the market has already established some sort of normal price, whether it's 50 cents or maybe $1 or $2. I can sell a nice glass of lemonade. The market has kind of set that just from experience. Okay, so the market sets the price, and then it's up to me to decide if I'm happy with that price, and I can decide to make money using that price. So here we go with another supply schedule. You notice the price, the market price for the products. This is what we could sell our product at, $10. I am willing and able to supply 100 units of this product. Let's say, what could I produce? Let's say some sort of a bow tie. All right, I make bow ties and I'm selling them. So if I can only get $10 for this bow tie, then I'm only going to produce 100. Okay, think about that. So kind of a low price, not much motivation, so I'm not going to make that many. If I can get $20 for this product, then I'm going to make 200. Okay, take advantage of that higher price. $30, then I'm going to make 300. And then we go down to the bottom. If I can get $50 for this bow tie, I'm going to produce 500 of these bow ties and try to really make some money if I can get $50. If the market tells me I can sell these bow ties at $50, hey, I'm all in. I'm going to produce as many as I can. So notice there's once again a trend, a pattern here with price, the price of your product that you can sell it at versus how much you're willing and able to supply. Okay. Now notice this idea of being able to supply it. You got to think, if I've got a little process for producing these bow ties, there's going to come a point where I am maxed out. I'm producing as many bow ties as I possibly can. I can't produce any more, any faster. Okay, unless I do some major expansion. So every business has kind of a max production capacity, whatever it might be. So let's say the market says I can make $70. Well, it depends on, can I make any more bow ties? Maybe I'm just working day and night and I'm just, exhausted. The factory's going. There's going to be a limit to how much of an increase I can make in supply. And if you think about the toilet paper issue, I think that's part of the problem, that, they were already pumping out as much toilet paper as they possibly could and shipping it to all these stores. People went out and bought it all at one time. Well, they can't just snap their fingers and boom, more toilet paper. They're already at max capacity. They're already pumping out as much paper products and hand soap as they can, and we just gobbled it all up. And now that's why there's none on the shelf. Believe me, they would love to put more on the shelf, but it's a matter of maybe they're at max capacity. They're producing as fast as they can. So those are things to think about. Why are things the way they are? All right, so if we put these on a graph, once again, we'll create the supply curve. So this would be kind of a J curve moving upward. So this is an upward sloping, positive sloping line called the supply curve. It shows you the relationship between the market price of a product or service. I know I'm focused on products, but it could be services like haircuts or something. So you notice low price, there's not a lot of motivation, so the supply is going to be relatively low. Once again, you got to think about with toilet paper, that's not a very pricey item. So you might not be willing to produce more toilet paper since it's such a cheap product. That might be another possible problem. What's my motivation? Now, if you maybe let me increase the price of that product, but there's a lot of laws and stuff that won't let you during an emergency jack your price up. We call that price gouging, because people will try to take advantage of the emergency. And you don't want to charge, you don't want to go out and see that toilet paper is now $50, a roll or something crazy like that. All right, so there's your curve, positive sloping. So it's kind of the opposite of demand there. All right, and then once again, you can come up with what's called the law of supply. As the market price rises for a good or service and these other factors remain unchanged, the quantity supplied will rise. So notice they're moving in the same direction. The price is moving up. So if I can, then I'm going to increase my supply for that product. If the market price falls, if it becomes kind of a cheap, not very profitable item, then my supply is going to fall as well in the same direction. So this is where you got to, pay attention. Demand, it's opposite. Supply, it goes in the same direction. So as a producer, what are other factors, these other factors we're talking about, that could also change how much of a supply you can produce? Well, costs of production. If it costs me more to produce an item, that's going to lower my ability to supply more of it. For example, once again, lemonade. If I make lemonade and all of a sudden the price of lemons goes up, then it's going to be harder for me to make lemonade because of my costs of production. And that goes back to those factors: land, labor, capital. If those things become more expensive, it's going to hurt me because I'm going to lose profit. I'm going to have to spend more money. It's going to shrink my ability to supply and produce. So that's a factor that could impact my supply. Or the opposite could happen. If lemons become a lot cheaper, then hey, I can buy more, I can produce more lemonade, try to make more profit that way. So it can work in either direction. Technology, productivity. If a new type of machine comes out that helps me produce lemonade and I invest in that machine, then that can help me be more productive and make more lemonade, increase the supply of lemonade. Government policies, very important. How much are they going to tax my business? What's the minimum wage? All of these things can impact a producer's ability or willingness to produce more or less of a product. If the government gives us a subsidy, that's going on now, right? The government is literally giving money to businesses to keep them in business, to help them produce more during this economic hardship period during the virus. The airline industry, the government's going to give them a bunch of money so that they can stay open, so they don't have to lay off employees. So that all has to do with government policies. If the government says, all right, now you got to start paying workers $15 an hour, well, that's going to cost me more money as a producer. I might have to lay off workers, and it may impact my ability to produce more. And then alternatives. Maybe I'm producing lemonade, maybe I could switch over to something else. Like I could produce Kool-Aid, or, I could make slushies. So, is what I'm doing going to make me money? If not, can I change to something else? Once again, going back to what's going on now, you've heard about factories where, they were producing one thing, like maybe they were producing jeans, and then now they're trying to produce masks and other different products. So some businesses can easily switch gears and produce something else that might be in more demand, right? So nobody can go out and buy jeans really. So the demand for jeans right now is lower, but the demand for masks is really high. So as a producer, if I have the willingness and the ability to switch gears and say, all right, we're not going to produce jeans now, we're going to produce masks. Boom. Now I can make money off of producing masks. So there's a lot of other factors that could play in increasing production or decreasing production. So that's the law of supply. So you've got demand, you got supply. So finding the right price. So we talked about the market price. The market sets the price. And the way it does that is that demand and supply work together. So when we talk about the right price, that is where the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. That is kind of the magical price. We call it the equilibrium or market price. So how do we find that? Well, if you do it using the numbers, and if you look in bold print there, when you put that original demand schedule and supply schedule together, you'll notice that at $30, the demand is 300 units and the supply is 300 units. So that's what we call the equilibrium or market price. So that's what we're looking for. At $30, there's enough demand to meet my supply, or I've got enough supply to meet the demand. There's no waste, there's no shortage. Notice if the price was too low, you would have a lot more demand and less supply, which is probably what's happening, like I said, with the toilet paper. There's a lot of demand for things like toilet paper, but the producers aren't willing to put out more of it at the rate that we need it, because there's not much incentive, because it's a really cheap product and you're not going to make a ton of money off of it. You might spend a lot more money producing more than you're going to make off of it. It's kind of how you look at that. You know, what's my motivation to make more toilet paper? If it's going to cost me a lot more to make it, then people are going to pay for it. And then vice versa. If the product is priced too high, like at $50, notice the demand is 100, but my supply is at 500. I'm trying to take advantage of a higher price, but no one's going to buy it, or not as many people will buy it at that high price. So I've got what's called a surplus. I've got too much supply now because the price is too high. So that $30 is that equilibrium where demand and supply are equal. You can do it graphically too. Now you can probably anticipate if I were to graph all these numbers, my demand curve, my supply curve, you know they move in opposite directions. So you can probably guess that they are going to meet at some point. And that point is that $30 mark. So when you do it graphically like this, you see the demand curve and the supply curve. They're going to meet at that intersecting point, which is $30, and the demand and supply is 300. Boom, right there. So if you get a graphical style question, then you know that that's an important place to look, is at that intersection there of supply and demand, because that's going to give you your market or equilibrium price. All right, so now it gets a little bit more tricky. So at what we've looked at up to this point is quantity demanded. So when the price changes, the quantity demanded or supplied is going to change. What we're going to switch to is something called overall, or aggregate supply and demand. The overall demand or the overall supply of something. What we're going to look at, and we're going to go through each of these separately, is that you can, when the overall demand or supply changes, you're going to shift the curve. So when you're looking at the graphs, the curve might shift to the right or to the left. Now, if you just kind of learn this simple rule, if you know a number line, if you go to the right, you're increasing. If you go to the left, you're decreasing. So that's what we're going to look at next. You know, what can make these lines shift? You know, what could cause the overall demand for something to go up or down? So this is where a lot of people start getting lost. What we've talked about before is pretty easy, but I think I want to teach you some of this harder stuff as well. I think some of you can pick up on it. All right. So in this graph, you've got your D1. D1 is the original demand. and then you've got your supply curve. Notice the original price, where everything was equal, is that S and D1, where those two lines meet, and that's at $1.20, and it's 300 units of whatever we're talking about. Let's say toilet paper. Well, actually, chocolate bars. Excuse me. It's got it up there. It could be anything: toilet paper, chocolate bars, whatever. So when this chocolate bar is priced at $1.20, your demand is 300, your supply is 300. All right, so D2 is showing you that there was some sort of shift in the demand. All of a sudden, these chocolate bars are in higher demand. You got to think about what would cause something like a chocolate bar to become more popular. For the demand for that chocolate bar, that candy bar, to go up. You know, maybe all of a sudden a celebrity does an advertisement for this chocolate bar. Now all of a sudden it's in higher demand. Now notice when the supply is constant, because notice we're not changing supply here, we're only going to change demand. I won't get too complicated. So if the supply stays the same, but all of a sudden the demand for this chocolate bar increases, notice what happens to the curve. You slide it to the right. That shows the increase. And then notice what happens to the intersection. The new intersection is higher. Now the market says that these chocolate bars are worth $1.60, and the demand is going to be 400, and you can supply 400. So that's good. So you're getting more for that chocolate bar. So hopefully that wasn't too hard for you. So we're going to go through these, like I said, one by one. So that was an increase in demand. You shift it to the right. So when you have to do this, you actually have to do this for your practice. So you're going to be given in the original graphs, supply and demand, and then you're going to read a scenario, and you've got to decide whether or not you're going to shift the demand curve right or left, or you're going to shift the supply curve right or left based on the scenario. So this is showing you how you would shift the demand curve. And what you would do is you would just draw D2. You're going to have the ability to draw that line on your assignment. And I'll probably walk you through how to do that using Nearpod. All right, next scenario is when the demand decreases. So once again, D1 is your original demand, S is your original supply. Once again, the original price was $1.20, and the quantity was 300. So here we see how you would illustrate a decrease in the overall demand for these chocolate bars. So let's say all of a sudden these chocolate bars, there was a news story that said these chocolate bars have been linked to, cancer or something. Or these chocolate bars, the company had to lay off workers or had to shut down because of coronavirus, something like that. Well, you might look at these candy bars differently, and you're going to, the overall demand is going to decrease for these candy bars for whatever reason. Notice what happens. The producer still has this same supply of candy bars, but now the demand for the candy bars has decreased. So what does he have to do? He has to lower the price because now there's a new demand at 200. So now he's got to lower the price to 80 cents for these chocolate bars because of the shrinkage in the demand. Okay, and that's pretty common sense, right? If something becomes less popular, you can't have the same price for it, right? Like older game systems, like the Xbox 360. You can't. When it first came out, it might have been, $200-300. You can't, put an Xbox 360 on sale for that much now. It's going to have a lower price because there's a lower demand. So keep that in mind. All right, moving on to supply. So this is how we look at supply. Notice now we're shifting the supply curve. So here we're shifting that supply curve to the left. Left means decrease. Once again, chocolate bars. So I have a supply of chocolate bars, S1, and then there's this demand. Once again, $1.20, 300, That's my original price and my original quantity supplied and demanded. But something happens to where the supply for these candy bars goes down. It's decreasing. It's moving to the left. I know when you look at it, it might kind of look like, well, the line is going up, but it's not. You're sliding the line to the left. You're not raising it. You're sliding it to the left. So that means it's decreasing. So think about it. If I've got these chocolate bars I'm making, they're pretty popular, and then all of a sudden there's a cocoa shortage, and now I can't produce as many chocolate bars. Well, the demand hasn't changed. The supply is now changing. So now there's fewer of these candy bars that I can produce because of the cocoa shortage. So what happens? I've got to raise my price. The price is now $1.60, and then I'm going to be supplying less of them, 200. So when you break it down bit by bit, I don't think it sounds too difficult. If you need to rewatch the video, rewind it, think about these examples over and over, I think you'll get it. And then, of course, the opposite can happen as well. Maybe all of a sudden, let's think about gas. I wish it didn't have chocolate bars, but let's think about gas prices. So we know that gas prices are linked to oil, right? So all of a sudden, if you've been following the stories, let's say, gasoline, oil was so many dollars per barrel, right? Well, what happened was oil producing countries in the Middle East, OPEC, we call them, they decided, and I think this was kind of as punishment, they said, well, we're going to just produce all of this oil. We're going to release the floodgates of oil. So now there's like so much oil out there, which is used to produce gasoline, that it's kind of become less valuable. So the supply has all of a sudden increased. And what's happened is the price drops. There's so much demand for oil, but if you all of a sudden increase the supply of it, then it's not as valuable. The price is going to drop. So that kind of explains what's happened to oil and gas prices, why they've gone down. Because there's too much oil out there being produced. So what will happen is eventually our demand, once we start driving more, once all of this stuff's over with, and then if they cut back on supply, you'll see gas prices eventually go back up. But right now, we're not driving. There's too much oil in circulation, so it's causing prices to be lower than normal. So here with the chocolate bars, same thing. Something happened to where you can produce a lot more chocolate bars, but the demand didn't change. So those chocolate bars become less valuable, and you got to get rid of them. So you're going to drop the price to 80 cents a chocolate bar to try and increase that demand, so you can get rid of some of that supply. Okay. And I think that was the end of the presentation. So let me show you what you're going to do now. After you do that, after you go through the presentation, you're going to go back to, if I can find out how to get there, exits. All right, so you're going to go back to your assignment, Nearpod. So here's a little practice assignment. So you're not going to submit the Nearpod stuff. You're going to submit your notes. So when you turn this in, take some notes off of the presentation. You're going to upload those notes to Canvas. For the Nearpod thing, make sure you enter your name. So you put your name right there. Type it in so I know who you are. And then you're going to join the session. All right, and then it's going to walk you through slide by slide, and it's going to tell you what to do. Some things to read, view. To advance, you're going to use these blue arrows. So once I'm done with that screen, then if there's a blue arrow here, you've got to click it, and that's going to take you to the next thing. Here, you're going to watch a video. Mr. Clifford, he does a lot of economics videos on YouTube. It's not that long, a little quick demand review. Another one on supply. So look at those two videos. Then it's going to have this little matching game. So you're going to click the blue arrow. So here's where the matching is. And I think I put like a 2-minute timer on here. And what you can do, actually, let me see. Sometimes the controls get a little confusing here. Oh, so use that blue arrow to get rid of that. I thought you could full screen this, but I guess you can't. Nope. All right, so matching. So market price. So you would match that to the picture. So we know the market price, well, it just happens to be over here. So market price and that. Good. Oh, nope. Market price. Oh, there it is. This one. Market price. So you want to match the picture that goes with the term, right? So there's one. So when you do that, they'll all turn blue and disappear. So practice with that. Just some term practice there. And once you're done with that, you'll move on to the next assignment. So here's where you get to draw a little bit. So you click on the scenario, decide if the scenario impacts supply or demand of spice. So this has to do with the spice trade. Then draw the new supply or demand curve that will result. So when you read the scenario, you click on it, read it. There's a little X to get rid of it. Then decide, is it going to impact supply or demand? And then here's your tools. You can draw on this. So let's say I thought it impacted demand. So I'll draw my new demand curve, call it D2. I can even show arrows. It's going that way. Increase in demand. And then my new price is right here. Okay, so you're just going to doodle on that. No big deal. If you need to undo, there's got little undo buttons. You can erase things. So just play around with that. For those who've used Nearpod before, maybe you already know how to do that. So you're going to do that. You got 4 different scenarios to look at for that. And then you got one little open-ended question where you're just going to type the response, or you can do an audio recording of your response if you want to. So there's where you type, or you can record audio. You submit that. Make sure you submit. And I want to say that might be the last thing. Nope. One more final video here. So another quick video just to kind of close out this lesson, and then you're done. And then what happens when you click that? So there. So you go all the way through, no more blue arrows, so that means you are done. Okay? So hopefully that was helpful. You guys keep hanging in there. We're only weeks away from finishing things up. So just keep working hard. If you've got any questions, just hit me up on Remind or email me. I know people are wondering about their grade. You know, if you understand the grading rules that came out, basically what we're doing is you're taking your 3rd quarter grade, and then based on how much you've done online in terms of work, you're going to get so many points added to your grade. And I'm going to give you as many points as you can, because some of you have been working really hard and you've done like 15 to 20 assignments already. If I can give you that many points, I will. But you're going to go up a letter grade or 2 if you do a lot of work online. If you don't do too much online, then your grade's not going to increase at all. And you're going to get basically whatever you had 3rd quarter. So keep working hard. Get your grade as high as you possibly can. And all this work's just going to benefit you moving forward. Some of you have shown that you're really mature and keep up with your work and do your assignments like you're supposed to. And that's going to help you down the road, because you've overcome this challenge. So that says a lot about you. So keep up the good work, and I will see you around the internet.